glass art is not present here in Chile. It's not taught in any school. So to learn glass processes for me was quite a challenging and slow process. I began experimenting by myself. This is, for you to have a context, is prior to social media and easy access to online information. So basically, through experimentation and through trial and error, I was able to learn or self-teach me certain techniques, mainly based on kiln work. My early body of work was very much connected to forgotten locations, like this mining town in the Atacama Desert of Humberstone, or this whaling house in the south of Chile, all places that once had a very important connotation for local economy and moved a lot of people and interests, and that are now kind of not part of what's relevant of a place. They're forgotten, but the architectural presence of these elements are still there. So my interest was to portray these places on glass, this fragile material. My first introduction to glass formally was as an exchange student, as an international student in NYU. NYU had its classes at Urban Glass. That's where I had my first gather, and where I was first exposed to all the different techniques. And so then I came back to Chile, and I was again exposed to this lack of access and facilities. The opportunity arose of having a residency in Scotland at Northlands Creative Glass, and I kept on developing work based on what I was seeing in these places. For example, this is an old croft house. These are more examples of vernacular architecture from Scotland in this case. Continuing my technical studies, for example, here I'm working in several layers of glass. I'm painting still with metal oxides, but now I had been introduced to Boucher enamels. So some of these pieces, I believe this is the first piece where I worked with Boucher enamels, and then trying thicker pieces and always representing space, people of the locations I was visiting. I became an expert in grant writing because every year I would do this Ruta del Vidrio, which I call it, where I would go to different locations to learn about glass. So these trips were kind of research/learning trips for me, where I would go and let's say in one summer I would do the craft schools in the US and go to Pilchuck, Pentland, Haystack, all and learn different techniques and meet people and kind of see all what was going on. And then I would come back to my studio in Santiago and be like, okay, what I'm going to do now with all this information, but without the capacity of developing. So I was doing that for several years till the moment I thought, okay, if I am going to pursue this career as a glass artist, I need to do things properly. And I mean, I could take workshops forever, but now I wanna commit in a deeper way. And I decided to go to graduate school. And so I went to RISD, to Rhode Island School of Design, to their glass program. And that's where my vision towards glass expanded or shifted. I don't know what's the proper word. In grad school, I think it's a common thing in many programs that you have to relearn everything. So all my questions, my technical questions about glass started being answered because I had access to the technical knowledge. But what was more medular for me was the way I was questioning things. Instead of representing architecture, I started to intervene architecture. And my main focus during those years was actually doing architectural interventions where I was working with other materials, which were not glass, but somehow had similar qualities. Instead of painting a wall, I was building a wall. In this case, in this work with plastic, I was building these spaces and challenging the viewer to walk through these spaces in different ways. Always in relation to questioning the why of the representing of the place. In this piece, for example, I made this tiny little incision in the wall, like a narrow matching space that you would find on the ground, but here was on the wall. And each day of the exhibition, it would open a bit. And then you guys can see, for example, how it ends up being a space where you can transit through. This piece was my thesis exhibition. You can see there's no glass here. So here I am I have done all the effort to go to grad school to study glass. And for my thesis presentation, I'm presenting plastic walls. So people were kind of confused about this. Family, friends, and people who knew my work were like, so weren't you studying glass actually? And I guess this is what graduate school might do to you. You think you're going to learn something, but you might learn that, but also other things. I was more interested about the location and what's the symbolism behind it rather than what was hung on the wall. So with all these questionings, I've done this chart to explain a little bit the thought process behind this and what led me to a very important project for me that I did immediately after graduate school. I began representing space by painting architecture on glass. Then I went to intervene architecture. And then from there, my main question after finishing these years of study was, how do you understand space without this architecture? Because we on a daily basis, we're surrounded by walls. Even if you go outside for a couple of days, you always come back to your home, to what's built. How do you perceive space in the absence of architecture or in the absence of built environments? And that's where I got the idea of joining or trying to join nomadic communities who don't have permanent architecture to see or try to understand how they see space. And this is the project I developed in Turkana in Kenya, which is titled Transient, inspired by Turkana. So during this period of time, I went to the Turkana region, which is in the north of Kenya, near the border of South Sudan and Ethiopia. And I joined a family of Turkana nomads. This is some of the footage I took while I was with the family. And I was living with them and migrating with them for some time. And I was trying to understand space. This is the local architecture. It's temporary architecture. The body of work I developed after this project was very simple. And I think what was more relevant for me was experience and the research rather than the final pieces. I did a series of photos of the houses, of the Turkana houses, the Akai, and I was looking very much into the details of the structures, of the connections, and the craft behind the making. So see how earlier I was looking at the walls. Here I'm still looking at the walls, but from such a different perspective, and walls that still permeate, right? They're somehow transparent and you can see through. I did a series of drawings of the connections. This was my house there. While living in that space in one of the migration cycles, I was very much interested in the notion of private space, right? How somehow in Western societies, we always have like private areas where you know, there's a boundary, there's a line. With the Turkana, I learned that boundary can be very blurry. Even if you're inside, you always see outside, and from the outside, you see inside. So these sculptures represent that, the notion of what's private and what's not. So these are the sculptures I presented afterwards, inspired by their houses. And then during the migration cycles, the objective for me was to understand how, when, and why of the movement. And I could see these boxes, these metal boxes here, sanduku are called. And then the piece I made inspired in those boxes was, again, representing the women carrying their belongings in the boxes inside a box. And here I want to stop for a second to mention that, as you can see, I'm using a transparent material that has similar capacities as glass to see through, to work as a shade for light, but it's not glass, right? I am referencing glass concepts with other materials, the same as the branches or in this case, it's a plastic acrylic. So I walk you through these pieces to show how through a long time, the traveling to learn about glass became, for me, more important than glass itself. What became much more substantial and instrumental for my practice was the trip itself, the going there and what I was seeing there and the people I was meeting there and the connections I would establish through the process of learning this one technique, right? So these years of learning gave me the tools, the right tools and the knowledge, the glass capacity, the technical capacity, but at the same time built a working system that has now become the base of my practice, which is somehow the field research, the going somewhere. So now the work that I do is very much based on research. I study places, and if there's the people and the communities within these places, sometimes there are no people, there are empty places. But overall, what I wanted to highlight is how this traveling became part of my practice.
Thanks for checking out this Geeks Shorts episode. This is just one of 10 chapters featuring the speaker's artwork, artistic practice, and direct conversations with the community. The full-length video, only publicly available for a limited time, can be found in the GEEX Talks subscriber archive, where you can also discover hours of content on even more contemporary glass artists and researchers. As a BIPOC and artist-led organization, GEEX redefines the culture of contemporary glass by canonizing artists and thinkers who have been historically marginalized in the field. If you'd like to support this effort, subscribe to GEEX and gain access to exclusive content. For more info, visit geeks.glass/support. Thanks to this episode's sponsors, listed on screen and in the video description below.